Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our panel today, where we will be taking a closer look at Asia in the wake of this pandemic and casting a longer view at recovery efforts and what will it take to reset the tourism industry. I'm Kathy Feliciano Chon, Managing Partner of Fin Partners Asia, based in Hong Kong, and I'm joined today by our esteemed panelists, all of whom are already familiar to many of you, but allow me to still introduce them. Dr. Mario Hardy is the CEO of Pacific Asia Travel Association, a membership organization that promotes the responsible development of travel and tourism in Asia Pacific. Dr. Hardy is based in Bangkok. Mr. Keith Tan is Chief Executive of Singapore Tourism Board, and Mr. Kairat Sadvakasov is the Vice Chairman of the Board for the Kazakh Tourism National Company. Welcome, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. One of the things we've learned about this crisis is it's fast-moving, fluid, and ever-changing. So I'd like to open our discussion today by taking a temperature check of what's happening in your respective countries right now, as many of us are in different stages of reopening. Kindly share with us what protocols have been put in place. What can we expect in the coming 2 to 3 months? I'll start with you, Mario, as you speak about Thailand.
Thank you, Kathy. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. In Thailand, we went through different phases, as I'm sure my colleagues in Singapore and Kazakhstan also did. There was a period of lockdown, of course, for an extensive period of time. Essentially been almost at home for 3 months. My last business trip was actually in Singapore, and returned to Bangkok the next day and never left for nearly 3 months. But as things actually started to open up a little bit, stores and restaurants and etc., protocols were put in place by the government called SHA, the Safety and Health Institute, administration, put some protocols in place. And the first few weeks as we returned to work, it was awkward. It was a little bit strange. You go down to get your coffee and forget to put your mask, you run back and take it again. You go to a shopping malls or a restaurant, you have to scan a QR code as you enter and exit at every single shop and every single restaurant. And again, it's not part of your natural habits, so you tend to forget, and people remind you about the process. Now that we've been back at the office for almost a month, 3.5 weeks, it becomes natural. We wear our mask everywhere we go. We scan our codes as we get in and out of different places. Varieties of protocols have been put in place for restaurants, spas, shopping malls, public places, public transport, and etc. And it becomes almost natural. And as I'm sure as things start to evolve over the next few weeks and months, there are different sets of protocols in different countries and different places. It'll be hard for travelers to get used to each one of them and understand the process. But I'm quite certain over a period of time, these were normalized. They'll standardize across different destinations also. It'll become a little bit easier as we move along. We're still in a phase which is a little bit difficult and confusing for people to just go around the city. The authorities of Thailand, I think I've done a pretty good job in the last couple of weeks. What they've done is, as part of a festival that PATA is organizing called Dream to Travel, the first week they actually presented a video which was recorded by a famous YouTuber here in Thailand that has millions and millions of fans, and got him to travel around the city of Bangkok as if he was a tourist himself. He went to a restaurant, he went to a shopping mall, he went to a spa. And it was actually quite interesting to see it live, to see somebody going through the process as opposed to reading a piece of paper that says, this is what you have to do when you enter here and here and here and here. It's easier for people like me who are visual to see someone going through the process and understanding actually what would happen if you come to Thailand next time to visit. And so I think, we're now starting to see airlines like Emirates and Qatar Airways and a few others are starting to put similar videos either cartoons or different videos explaining actually how the process is going forward. It reminds me for those of you who are old enough to remember 9/11 and
Of course.
post 9/11 and about the security processes that actually started afterwards, which was led to lots of confusion. It was difficult to travel to one airport to another. Um, Protocols were different. And for at least 12 to almost 18 months, you had this a bit of chaotic process as you travel, trying to figure out what you're supposed to do. And and we're in that phase at the beginning where, which to me sounds a little bit similar. And I just hope that over the next 12 months, if not earlier, we'll see some normalization, as I said before.
Is Thailand open to international travel yet, or is it still largely domestic?
No, largely domestic. We have some regional flight that just started barely a week ago, just a few days ago, started to slowly open up with limited numbers of visitors. Rapid testing is done at the airport on arrival. People have to pre-register before they travel. But it's a very small numbers at the moment. It's very limited, focused on business travelers mostly. And for people who must travel to Thailand, either for medical purposes, or reunite with their families and things like this. But in terms of tourists in large numbers, not yet. However, the domestic tourism picked up really rapidly.
And are you imposing a 14-day quarantine period as they are here in Hong Kong?
Uh, it's selective. Some countries have to do a quarantine, some others don't.
Got it. How about you, Keith? What's happening in Singapore?
Well, the situation is gradually improving. Just a quick check on the numbers. I just looked at the numbers today. We have a running total of 45,000 positive cases of COVID-19 so far over the last several months. That sounds high, but of which 42,000 come from our foreign worker dormitories. We just have about 2,000 cases in our general population. But more importantly, the average number of cases per day being diagnosed from the foreign worker dorms, which is where the bulk of the cases are, has fallen from a high of 930 per day a few months ago to 192 as of a few days. So the situation in the foreign worker dorms is coming under control after a Herculean effort. In the wider community, the average numbers used to be a hit high of 50 per day. A few months ago, it is now about 8 or 9 a day, and that's coming down. So the situation in the population is getting quite well under control. I believe right now we have had a total of 26 deaths, one of the lowest in the world, and of there are 4,300 active cases, of whom only 2 are in the intensive care unit. The vast majority are actually asymptomatic, or they are well and recovering and are in community isolation facilities. They aren't even in hospitals, but are in various other facilities to isolate them from the community until they are non-infectious. So the situation is getting under control compared to a few months ago. And we're quite confident in the capacity of the healthcare system to bear any sudden or unexpected surges. Now, this therefore gives us confidence to gradually reopen our country and our economy. We had a 2-month circuit breaker, which is akin to a lockdown a few months ago, but we have now reopened. And we're reopening in stages and in phases like many other countries. The tourism economy is doing that gradually as well. And my organization, the Singapore Tourism Board, is working with the health authorities to go through what protocols need to be put in place, what sorts of desired health and infection control outcomes that hotels, attractions, guided walking tours, have to put in place. And those have already started, and we have been able to reopen our attractions and our hotels quite gradually for domestic tourism. We are now walking through the more complicated process of what those protocols could look like for MICE events or leisure events. Those would be more complicated, and we will have to take a bit more time to go through that. But we are quite confident that we can resume some degree of safe business event later on this year, as well as safe leisure events.
Have you resumed international travel yet? Are there flights coming in?
There are flights coming in and out. Singapore Airlines has resumed flights to about, I think, 27 cities. A lot of that travel is transit and transfer through Changi Airport. There are people coming into Singapore, but these are people who are based in Singapore but found themselves stranded outside Singapore when we closed our borders earlier. So now they're all coming back. There are also people who are based in Singapore who are flying back to China or elsewhere. But generally, we're still closed to international travel.
Great. Kairat, I know that Kazakhstan is in a whole different stage of reopening. Can you take us through where you were 3 weeks before and where you are today?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Greetings from the other side of Asia. Kazakhstan is half in Europe, half in Asia. So sometimes people don't really consider it Asia. Well, just a brief introduction to Kazakhstan. Just I'm doing this, bringing this into the context because I'll be touching upon that. We're the 9th largest country in the world, sandwiched between Russia and China. And we're about the size, I think, 3.8 thousand of Singapore. Once again, I'm bringing this on purpose because I'll be speaking about this quite interesting facts. So back to your question, Kathy, about the temperature. Temperature is quite high here. A lot of new cases, almost 1.5 thousand daily new cases happening in Kazakhstan. We introduced a complete lockdown on the 16th of March. We remained in that state until mid of May. Then with the gradual lifting of the complete lockdown until beginning of June. So since the beginning of June, we were completely open until yesterday. So what happened? We kind of got ourselves into a situation of a swing. You know, the harder we pushed with opening and lifting, the harder it hit us with new cases. And if had it been, we knew that scenario would happen, and we would switch this, swap this 2 lockdowns. As of yesterday, we introduced a new round of lockdown. It's kind of a situation now that we arrived to. From everything is forbidden, we came to everything is allowed, but with certain limitation. So if we knew this would happen, we would rather introduce this current state back on the 16th of March, because things were not really bad at that time. And it's a lot of interesting facts that we're sharing a pretty big border with China. We have a free trade zone with China, but the virus never came through China. It came at the end of March from Europe. And interestingly enough, it came that late. You know, in different parts of the world, it already started appearing in January. But here, bordering China, it came that late. So the situation is really interesting here. Right now, we have about 50,000 cases, with more than half of them are still active. Quite a lot of casualties. We have more than close to 200 fatal cases. Right now, with a new round of lockdown, we're trying to stay away from big congregations of people, but the business remains open. Hotels are open, resorts are open. Some of the activities inside industry objects like hotels, resorts are still limited. For instance, no events are allowed, no exhibitions, spas and swimming pools, indoor swimming pools are prohibited, but we see outdoor cafes still open with a capacity up to 50 people. We see hotels open, beaches open, and then it also differs by region. If the region is developing more new cases, more than 0.7% of new cases daily, then we have to limit certain activity of, let's say, national parks in that particular region. So overall, the second round of the lockdown is less stringent. It feels like almost back to normal, business as usual, but as Mario mentioned, and when you come to certain places, you have to keep the protocol, wearing masks, trying to use cashless payment, and so on. And with the second round of the lockdown, we're trying to save the industry, because in the beginning, although tourism is one of the government's priorities in terms of the economic input, we didn't get enough support of the industry except for tax relief, such as payroll taxes and property taxes until 1st of October. So the small and medium enterprises were completely relieved of those taxes. And then we also offered some social help to workers who remained jobless or lost jobs during the time of the state of emergency or the quarantine, which kind of coincided in March and April and beginning of May. So this is in a nutshell what's happening. Just to recap again, we had to complete two phases of the lockdown. Right now we are open to handful of countries, including Japan, Thailand, Georgia, Turkey, and South Korea. The national carrier resumed flights, as well as a couple of international carriers resumed flights to Kazakhstan, but we still don't allow international travelers. We're open only to special government delegations, to families of expats who want to reunite, or Kazakhstanis who are also residents of other countries. They can go outside of the country, but largely for tourism, we're remaining still closed. The forecast that we should be opening back in August, that's the upside kind of forecast we're really hoping for, in order to still kind of catch the last months of the normal touristic season.
Great, thank you. And I think what you've just illustrated is the reality of the situation we're in, and that is, you know, the ongoing threat of continued waves of infection will be with us for months to come until a vaccine is discovered or approved. But I want to talk about safety, because obviously this is a paramount, I think, our paramount concern now and going forward, and actually forevermore when it comes to our industry. In particular, how will governments and destinations use technology to implement new health and safety protocols? And how can destinations ensure that a sensible approach to safety does not compromise the authenticity and privacy of the travel experience? Keith, you mentioned earlier about reimagining business travel and MICE business. Can you tell me more about how you're implementing technology to be able to address this?
Well, we have to think about the entire experience of business travel. So even starting at the point where people have not yet even come to Singapore, right? We need our MICE event organizers to start engaging the registered participants, say 2 weeks ahead of time, using cell phones, email, to remind them to check their health, right? To monitor their health status. And that's important because, and it also sends a reminder, look, if you are feeling feverish, then maybe you can't come, you know, don't come, and so on. And then maybe a few days before, then go ahead and get your swabs or your checks before you come to Singapore. That's important, not just for me, not just for that particular participant, but for everyone else who's coming, because it gives every other participant a bit more confidence that everyone else coming for that event is a little bit healthier, or at least on paper is healthy and it's clear, right? So that's pre-event. When you come here to Singapore, then what can we do at the point of the airport, through the point where you leave the airport to come to your hotel? How can we make that as seamless and as contactless as possible? so that you don't, from the perspective of that traveler, it is seamless, which is a great experience anyway, right? Even before COVID-19, we would have wanted to make the process of going through an airport quick and painless, and ideally contactless for any business traveler. The ideal is getting through the airport in 10 minutes. And now we have a good reason to do so, right? If we can use technology to seamlessly move that traveler through the airport with minimal contact with others, that would be great. And we are working towards that outcome, right? And even at the point when you get to the hotel, right, rather than having to queue up to check into your hotel, which happens especially if it's a large group coming in. Again, can we use technology to make that process straightforward, so I don't have to present myself and my passport and credit card at the hotel check-in counter? I can do that even before I get to the hotel, and I get straight to my room, right? I'm given a code on my phone. I use that to check into my room, and voila, again, painless and contactless. These are things that we would have been trying to do in peacetime anyway. But now, again, COVID-19 has given us an added impetus to try to accelerate some of these innovations, all enabled by technology. So we want to do all these. In Singapore as well, we are using a technology called Safe Entry. It's based on scanning QR codes. So whenever anyone, a foreigner, Singaporean, goes to a mall, goes to a restaurant, goes to a shop, I use my cell phone, I scan the QR code at the entrance of that establishment. It records the fact that I'm there, I check in. Then when I leave, I check out. So then there is some record that I was there, and later on, if there were an infection traced to that location at the time that I was there, I get informed that I may have been exposed. So that again gives us some degree of assurance as well. We will have to find that balance between privacy as well as assurance, but I think we will get there. And for now, our sense is that people will lean more towards giving up more of their data in order to give greater assurance to ourselves that we are protected. We will have to negotiate that balance along the way.
So, I mean, we have a lot of topics to cover, and I know that we don't have a whole lot of time. So unless either of you have any more to add on the issue of safety, I'd like to move on to another hot issue, which is sustainability. It goes without saying that the pandemic has been a clarion call for issues like over-tourism and sustainability. And as we move forward, governments and destinations are often having to balance, economic growth versus sustainable resource management. So, Mary, I know that you're quite passionate about this, and I wanted you to address how can sustainability become part of recovery and truly drive the long-term prospects of the industry? And what will it take from different key stakeholders, whether it's governments, tourism companies and brands, as well as traveling public, to make sure that sustainability is truly here to stay?
Yeah, I feel at the moment we've done one step forward and two step back, actually, in terms of sustainability. There was a lot of discussions and a lot of actions, really good actions being taken by various hospitality brands and various other businesses pre-COVID-19 to move to a more sustainable future for the tourism sector. Sadly, during this event at the moment, we're seeing an increase in plastic use. Obviously, we have millions and millions of masks that people are using and throwing away, and et cetera. So we need to find that balance moving forward, to go back to the priorities we had before and probably try to accelerate it a little bit. As Keith has said, in terms of technology, I'm truly excited because many of the technologies we were talking about before COVID-19, that for some people, might have felt it was like science fiction, are actually now happening at an accelerated rate. They're moving really, really fast. The same thing, I think, in terms of sustainability. A lot of it is driven by technology use, but also in changing people's habit. We know from various surveys that in terms of the future of travel, the #1 criteria for choosing your place, your destinations, your places to stay, and who you're going to travel with will be actually cleanliness and sanitizations also. That's going to be really, really critical. TripAdvisor has done a month's survey in that area. We have done the similar surveys. and receive similar responses to that. It's going to be really important for people in choosing where they want to go. The activities they will want to do moving forward too might also be different. Big cities with big crowds of people, probably not for most people. They will be looking for a beautiful landscape like the one behind Keith at the moment, which is actually in nature, away from big crowds, away from the city. And ecotourism will become more popular. And again, these criteria of sustainability. Now, we have to remember, when we talk about sustainability, we tend to think about the environment. And that's a really critical part and important one. But you also have to think about financial sustainability, social responsibility, economic responsibility also, or sustainability. Those are really critical. And I think the challenge that every destination is having, every country is focusing at the moment, is this is as much as an economic crisis as a health crisis, and is achieving that balance between the two. Here in Thailand, a survey was conducted amongst the population about the current situation. And the sentiment for the population here in Thailand is that 54% have said they'd rather not open the borders. They believe and they associate COVID-19 with actually foreigners coming to the country. Rightly or wrongly, but that's the perception at the moment, is that actually as you open borders, people actually bring the disease with them and increase the risk of contaminations. In Thailand, we've been fortunate. We only had just slightly over 3,000 cases of reported cases here in the country. And we've managed to control that level very, very tightly. We had a small reoccurrence just a few weeks ago with some foreign laborers coming back to the countries and bringing back the disease. But again, it was really well controlled. And obviously, we'd like to keep it this way. And that's achieving that balance. So, sustainability is much more than just environment.
So within the context of the economy and obviously economic targets as well, I wanted to pivot a little bit to Kairat, because I know that Kazakhstan has made ambitious targets of increasing your tourism, the size of your tourism market to 8% from 1.5% of your total GDP. Given what's happened with the pandemic going forward, obviously some readjustments will need to take place, but how much of the focus right now on sustainability, the return to nature and all of these things is changing the way you're going to achieve these targets in the next 5 years?
You're right, Katie. Tourism was hit the hardest, and we have to revisit our national strategy that we adopted just last year, short before we run into the situation. Now the entire action plan is being revisited. 8% growth to GDP is no longer possible, so we have to readjust, although we still continue injecting more money into infrastructure, building roads, electricity, all the utilities. We really have to rely only on domestic tourism and until, I don't know, 2021, 2022 maybe. I think that's the topic we'll also discuss about. But for now, sustainability for us, I think we have to go back to the definition of sustainability in tourism. The bottom line, I mean, it's 4 bottom lines. It has always been a quadruple bottom line for sustainability in tourism. It's environmental, it's economic sustainability, social and cultural, but we have to add really another dimension into this. So the 5th dimension is safety. With this, I'm going back to what I mentioned about the size of Kazakhstan. Besides being one of the largest countries in the world, we are the least densely populated country with only 6 people per square kilometer. So I think when we speak about safety, it's really being away from others. And what we see now, the response of the market and the market adjustment is really great here. We see a lot of bungalows and caravanning, this RV type of camps popping up in different parts of the country. We're seeing a lot of people going back to automobile traveling now, as opposed to flying and so on. And it's amazing that people really start realizing that travel per se is still safe. It's not dangerous, but the way you travel that really is a game changer. So right now we will be changing and I think supporting more projects that offer this kind of experience, being away from others, be it a guest house somewhere in the national park, be it a bungalow somewhere in the desert, be it a RV camp somewhere outside of big cities. And I really feel for big cities like Nur Sultan, the capital city, or Almaty, because with the population over 1 million, it's really impossible to stay away from each other. So in our revisited strategy, we will see more money coming from the government, from the central government, going into this project. Right now in the pipeline, we have 44 new projects for which we spared 120 million US dollars just to support those projects in terms of infrastructure, bringing running water, bringing sewage, and so on. Until 2025, we had a plan of injecting a whole lot more money, but once again, it will be all related to infrastructure, let's say, rather than marketing. So domestic is really prevailing. All these projects that will be promoting social distancing will be on the priority and on top of our agenda.
It sounds like you guys were already built for social distancing before the pandemic. But
Yes,
Kathy,
that's right.
can I?
Natural social distancing, I think.
natural social.
Kathy, I must make a plug for cities, because coming from a city of 5.5 million people, I do think that there is still a value to traveling to cities, notwithstanding the fact that naturally cities they are more densely populated for sure. But I believe that in cities like Singapore, Bangkok, or other similar cities, Hong Kong as well, right? I think the focus therefore must lie in the ability to give very high assurance of very high standards of cleanliness, hygiene, sanitization. And for us in Singapore, then we are working also with our stakeholders and partners to create exclusive, bespoke, small group experiences. So rather than going to the zoo as part of a larger group of 50 people, can you now do that with a group of just 5 others, maybe your family, right, on a more exclusive, privately led excursion through that? And we think people will be willing to pay for that, both domestically as well as when we open up for an international audience as well. So I think it is then the onus for city destinations like Singapore then lies in giving A, that assurance, and B, creating that sort of smaller group exclusive experiences that will be a bit more meaningful for visitors.
Okay, we're staying in cities too. Don't worry, Keith. But we only have 15 minutes left, and we have a couple of other hard-hitting issues that we need to tackle, and one of which is the economic impact of COVID on our industry. I mean, it goes without saying it has been catastrophic, and it will take years for us to recover. And I know that PATA recently concluded a survey on the business impact of the pandemic, of which they are going to be releasing the results in the coming days. So Mario, could you give us a sneak peek on some of the things that we will learn from these findings, and what is the way forward for all of us in industry?
Sure. Back in April, PATA ran a business impact survey across not only its membership, but across the industry in general. The majority of the respondents, I would say more than 85% of the respondents, were SMEs, small businesses within the Asia Pacific region. And at that time already, got to remember, this is already back in April, 15% of these businesses had already closed permanently. 42% of the respondents said they only had money for 2 to 4 months, which means by now that the majority of those are already closed again. 65% of the businesses were not prepared for any type of crisis at all. They had no crisis communication plans, no disaster recovery plans. They were not prepared for any type of crisis, regardless of something of this size. And 38% had already at that time made a significant number of furlough or layoff or temporary layoff for majority of their businesses. Now, considering that we're already in July, this was done in April, and then looking forward, we know that this is going to carry on with us, going to stay with us for several months to go, if not actually even much longer than that. We're going to see a very large number of small businesses disappearing in the sector. Even some hotels are having some issues now, or smaller boutique hotels, and etc. Airlines, of course, we see in the media every day, are also suffering enormously. It's going to take years for the industry to recover from this. Our forecast, as we published it, I mean, if anyone can have any type of reliable forecast in this instance, I think it's really challenging. But which is pretty much aligned with WTTC and UNWTO also, is that we're not going to see a full recovery until 2024. Now, it could be longer. I've seen some scary figures in the media recently from scientists saying that, you know, a vaccine could potentially be found in the next 2 years, and they're going as far as 14 years. So we're going to have to live with this current situation for much longer than we probably wish for, but we have to find ways to cope with it. As Keith mentioned before, the guidelines and the protocols, regardless if you work in the city or in remote areas, they're the same. They have to be applied. They have to have consistency and standardization across the region, at least in ASEAN, if not on a global basis, of the protocols implemented specifically with air travel, to make it as seamless and as easy as possible, but as safe as possible for people to be able to move around. Because otherwise, if we don't, literally, we will have no industry moving forward. There are too many businesses that are actually suffering at the moment. And we need to reinstate confidence and trust in the travelers and start traveling again. But safety first, and so we have to have these protocols really tight, have good measures to track movement, to do testing, as many tests as needed to ensure the safety of the travelers moving forward.
In the remaining minutes, I'd like to take us to 5 years from now. And I know a lot has already been said about our recovery in the next 6 to 12 months, you know, starting with domestic to regional and later on international. But I'd like to take us further beyond to 3 to 5 years and ask you to make certain predictions about where our industry will be and what we can expect. What will be some of the things that will be lasting changes to our industry, the way we behave, the way we do business, and the way we travel. And I encourage you to be as provocative as possible. We have 10 minutes left, so I will give you each 3.5 minutes to share your predictions going forward. And whoever wants to take this first, put your hands up. Brave ones. I will pick one of you to do it. Kyrat, you go first.
Okay, I knew that.
Okay.
All right. Okay, 3 to 5 years scenario. On my side, I'm not a fortune teller, but you know, the situation is changing daily, especially here. Just to give you an example, to lead my opinion is that once we opened up in the last 3 weeks, we had doubled our cases, almost similar to what we had in the past 3 months. So you can imagine how things can roll out when there is a complete lifting of the lockdown. So on my side, I don't see any MICE tourism happening in the next 3 to 5 years. And if we speak about digital, how digital is helping MICE, digital is not actually helping MICE to revive. Digital is helping MICE to stay in the virtual environment for as many years as possible. That cuts costs of traveling and so on. That's killing travel, but that keeps other business alive because people can still meet in the cyber environment. Speaking of travel, I kind of incline towards safety bubbles than complete opening to different countries. I know it's really hard. Just to give you an example, Russia is having the most cases in the world, given the population size and so on. And we have the biggest border with Russia in the world, stretching for more than 5,000 kilometers with 40 plus points of crossing the border. We will never be able to do a bubble, safety bubble with that country, and maybe we should look into some other countries that are outside of the region. But it's again, as we discussed with Mario earlier, you cannot ensure that the other side will really strictly adhere to, not letting other citizens with a higher case of COVID into that particular country and then exchange with you. I'll give you another example, although sad but realistic. We opened up connectivity with Turkey. So the first plane that took our tourists to Antalya carried 4 passengers active COVID on board, resulted in the quarantine of the entire board of 100 people going to Antalya, staying in Antalya hospital for several days to test and so on. So this export or import of COVID can be happening, and I agree with Mario again that we should be living as the virus will never go off. So that's the reality, and if we look to beyond 3 to 5 years, I think the travel habits will change drastically. Ecotourism, staying away from big cities. I really feel, once again, I really feel that traveling in big cities, and Keith, nothing I'm not trying to scare other people, and have a lot of friends in Singapore and Hong Kong and all these packed cities. But unfortunately, I'll give you again an example of Astana, of Nur Sultan, a city slightly over 1 million people is seeing new cases just because we opened up public transportation and so on and so on. Although wearing masks, myself, I was wearing masks, but to tell you the truth, I had COVID just 3 weeks ago. I went through this. It took me 2 weeks to recover. It's just been 1 week that I'm away from this disease, and it can happen to everyone. No matter how strict you are with wearing a mask and disinfecting your arms and so on, it just doesn't depend on you. It's what others are doing, and it's really hard, again, with countries like Kazakhstan, huge territories, to keep everyone playing by the same rules. So my forecast will be a little bit downside scenario, that travel, it will just like Mario said, 2024 is something that we should look forward to for full recovery, if this will ever happen.
Great. Keith,
So,
a few minutes of your time.
Thank you. I don't disagree with what Kairat has said, but I want to offer the perspective that along the next 3 to 5 years, what if, while we may not be able to find a vaccine, I don't know how long that might take, and even if you find one, then how fast can you manufacture and distribute it, right? But even if we don't find a vaccine, I think it is a safe assumption to make that our healthcare systems will evolve and adapt accordingly, right? Whether they find effective therapeutic medicines to help, even if you were diagnosed, right? Or you have much more rapid testing so that you know within 3 minutes whether you have it or not. So the healthcare systems will probably evolve along the way. Now, if those systems of testing, systems of therapy evolve along the way as well, then I think that gives people a bit more assurance too, that even if I were to get COVID, despite my best efforts, right, that the chances of me getting really ill or dying are much reduced, because of rigor in the healthcare system, because I'm quickly isolated or I'm given the right sorts of medication, right? And if I wonder if then gradually we are able to then shift the perspective of COVID-19 to so that it doesn't seem like a disease as scary as, I don't know, smallpox, but something a bit more like influenza plus. Now, I think we're quite far from that, looking at the situation in many countries, but if we were able to move towards that, right, then what would that do to travel and tourism? Because my fundamental view about travel and tourism is that people want to travel. They will want to see the world and explore at the earliest chance, and there will still be demand there. There will be demand to travel, to see the world, for leisure, for business as well. And the earliest opening, people will jump at it. And that, of course, is scary, right? Which is why the governments, I think the onus lies on governments to be very careful, very cautious about opening borders. I think that's correct. That's the right thing to do. Right?
Right.
Because the moment any opening you give, people will travel. But I do think that over 3 to 5 year period, as our healthcare systems evolve, governments can become a little bit more confident in opening up borders for travel, expanding. We have green lanes. We are negotiating reciprocal green lanes with other countries. We have one with China already. I fully expect that to expand and grow more. And maybe I'll just end off by saying this. What we have also realized in the earlier days of the pandemic was how intertwined travel and tourism was with supply chains and industry. Because the moment planes stopped flying, not only did the number of travelers decline to almost zero, but the inputs to industry also collapsed, right? Lots of things are flown in the bellies of passenger aircraft, right? It's fresh foods, it's roses and flowers, it's just-in-time components for industry, right? And countries depend on these planes for keeping supply chains healthy and functioning, right? And we realize that when planes stopped flying, that other parts of the economy, not just travel and tourism, also were badly hit. So I think we still need to sustain some of that over the next few years. And I'm reasonably confident that there will be some rebound in travel and tourism, at the very least, just to keep the airlines in place, to keep supply chains well functioning.
Great. Mario, unfortunately, we have a few minutes, but I'd like to end with you. Final
Sure.
thoughts in 2 minutes.
All right, I'll keep it very short. And Keith, I'd like to reassure you, as soon as you reopen, I will be back. So maybe my last trip was to Singapore. Maybe my first will be back to Singapore.
Thank you. By the way, the background is Singapore as well. My background.
I know.
Yeah,
I've been there.
Yes.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And let me end by saying that actually, I do believe, I have faith in humanity, and I have faith in actually in our industry, that we're resilient. And as Keith have said, we will find measures and ways to actually move forward, because we have to. And everyone has a great desire to travel. I want to travel. And we've done a survey in China, about April time. And the response was more than 80% of people said that the first thing they want to do as borders reopen is to go out and travel again. So, the same applies to the rest of the world. We've seen what happened in Europe in the last few weeks as, traditionally, the people from the north go to the south for the summers, and people are now traveling in masses also. And we're all watching carefully to see what's going to happen over the next few weeks in Europe. But the desire to travel is there. And so I am quite confident that each of our respective health authorities and various governments will actually find ways for us to be able to move safely moving forward. Yes, it will be complex. Yes, it will be a lot of procedures. Yes, we may have to show up at the airport earlier, and etc. But there will be measures for us that will allow us to travel again. And as vaccines or other treatment is found moving forward, that process will ease, and we'll get back to some form of, I wouldn't say normality, but travel more easily in the coming years for sure.
Well, gentlemen, I know that we can keep going on this topic, and I think we can all agree that, travel will rebound. It's just a matter of when. And as human beings, we are built to embrace the world. We're not built to close it out. So I want to end on that note. Again, I would like to thank all of you, Keith, Mario, and Kairat, for joining us today, and for our listeners for sitting with us throughout this topic. Again, thank you. And I yield the floor to the next session that's taking place. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.